You're listening to the Well Woman podcast. I'm your host, Jema, women's menstrual cycle educator, natural fertility coach, and daytime mermaid. This is a place where we discuss all things periods, poo, ovulation, fertility, and sex. Join me weekly as we rediscover our menstrual cycles, unlock its superpowers, and guide you back into your cyclical nature. Lynne, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be a part of this.
Very welcome. You're very welcome. I'm also really excited. We've been having a little giggle before we hit record. We're talking about such an important topic today, like a really important topic. And I'm really excited to dive into that because it's just not normalized or communicated enough about. So before we dive in, tell us what day of your cycle are you on and how are you checking in with your body today?
Sure. So day of the cycle, I actually don't currently have a cycle. I'm newly postpartum. I have a 3-month-old. And so due to breastfeeding, I don't have a cycle. And how I check in with my body is right before I go to work, I usually just kind of like sit on my desk chair and ground myself and try to think like, is there a part of my body that feels tense? And then, I just try to kind of like decompress right before my day starts.
I love that. Like how you start your day, like what's the saying that like how you start your day is how you win your day or something?
Yeah.
It's like the foundations are so important at the start of the day. And I'm sure you've learned a lot about that with a new little bub.
Yep. Yeah, the importance of self-care. Definitely I knew about it before, but now it came full circle how important it truly is to take care of your body so that you can take care of others. Yeah.
It's like the airplane, like make sure you fit your own oxygen first. You're
Yep.
like, but what about my baby? Very, very important. So thank you for sharing. Now, a lot of people know you as Dr. Lynne, but tell us, how did you become a naturopathic doctor and then specialize in PMDD? Like, how was that all linked together and what led you on this journey to love this aspect of health?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm currently residing in Canada, so in North America. And to become a naturopathic doctor, it takes 8 years after high school to become one. And the reason why I decided to go down that route is through my own menstrual concerns when I was a teenager and a young adult. I struggled. Like my periods were horrific. They were so painful. I would actually faint and vomit everywhere. Like I would dread every single month. And it would take me out for like a few days every single month. And I ended up seeing my own naturopathic doctor and got a lot of help through that. I'm like, okay, yes, this is exactly what I want to do. In my career, I want to help people who have like period related issues or hormone related issues. And so that is what made me go down this route. And then at school, you're kind of just like, you just learn how to be like a general practitioner. And then through continuing education is when you really start to focus, like you get a focus, I guess, in your practice on like whatever it is that you want to. So I wanted to focus on like hormonal health and PMS and PMDD and any period related issues that might come up for people.
Powerful. And there are a lot of period issues. I like to call them challenges. But there are a lot out there, like me as a menstrual cycle educator, and I've been doing this for like a long time too. There are a lot out there. So before I ask you, like, what is PMDD for those who don't know what PMDD is, how many people, like menstruators, womb owners out there really struggle with things like PMDD?
Yeah, so PMDD, the stats are somewhere around 8 to 12%, or other resources will say 1 in 20 people or menstruators will have PMDD. And that's a huge, like, that's a pretty big statistic. Because if you think about it, we can all think of 20 different menstruators in our lives, and at least one of them struggle with this very serious condition.
I did not know that 8 to 12% of people
Yeah.
experience things like PMDD because it's just not talked about. And I know that some people are like, but I'm the only one that has painful periods and I'm the only one, but you're actually not. And I really am a big educator on the difference between what's normal and what's common. And I think things like this, and we'll talk about everything that contributes to it, but it's becoming a lot more common and a
Yeah.
lot more people are experiencing it. Is this what you've seen too in your own practice?
Yeah, I have seen that as well. And I think, I don't know if it's because it's becoming more common or it was just normalized for too long that now people are realizing this isn't normal to feel this way. Like just because someone's a menstruator or has a uterus, they shouldn't feel this way every single month. And so I don't know if it's just more people coming for help now and realizing I shouldn't be down for a few days or even a couple of weeks every single month. Like that's a huge chunk of someone's life to feel this way.
A massive chunk of someone's life. And to know that on average, we have 12 to 13 cycle or menstruation periods a year. That's a lot of time if you add it up. I'm without an abacus, I really can't work this out, but like 12 times, like, let's say it's 5 days, 12 times 5, that's a lot of numbers. Okay. We're into 3 digits. So yeah, you're right. There is a lot. And I liked when you said, one of 20, I think of 20 people standing in a row and it's like one person steps forward, like that's a really big chunk considering like 48% of the population of the planet are female or born female. Like that's a lot of people and we need more education, support and understanding around this. So let's talk about it. What is PMDD? How do you explain PMDD to someone who's like, oh, I think I might have PMDD or do I just have PMS? What is PMDD?
Sure. So PMDD stands for Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this saying, but it's essentially PMS on steroids. So it's a lot more of a serious type of PMS. So there's PMS that's just a bit of an annoyance, right? Where it's like, my boobs are a little sore, or like, I feel a little bit more irritable, but it doesn't get in the way of your life. PMDD is truly like very significantly a change in how someone feels both physically and mentally. And there's a whole criteria of like different symptoms that are required to get a diagnosis. And it can be really tricky to get the diagnosis because again, PMS is so normalized, or even it's used as a joke sometimes, like, oh, she's just PMSing, no big deal. Like, and it's like, no, like it could be actually quite significantly like impactful to someone's life if they're going through something as severe as PMDD.
Okay. You just mentioned a couple of really good things. If someone is thinking, oh, actually, this is not feeling like, of course it doesn't feel fantastic, but this is not feeling like it's really in alignment with me or that I'm in actual, like a healthy state. How would someone get to the stage where like, okay, I think I have PMDD. I need to go work that out or I need to go get some support. Before we talk about like the diagnosis side of it, how would someone actually work that out? I have my own thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah, sure. So the best thing is to track. Tracking is such a powerful thing because me as a practitioner, I love when my patients come in, fully track their symptoms. It allows for quicker diagnosis because now I don't have to send them home having to track their symptoms for the next few cycles to then come back and give me that information. It's already tracked. So tracking is really key here. And not just tracking at that time of the cycle in the luteal phase, so the second part of the cycle. It's really about tracking the entire cycle to make sure that there's nothing else going on, because there can be an overlap with anxiety and depression. It can be hard to kind of pinpoint, is it just anxiety that worsens before your period? Is it depression that worsens before your period? Or is it this new set or this new diagnosis called PMDD? So tracking throughout the entire cycle, how you're feeling every day is super important.
That's what I was going to say. Like, that's exactly what I would recommend.
Yeah.
But also I think, and like, tell me if I'm wrong, because sometimes I could be wrong. But if someone is tracking their cycle for, let's say 3, 4, 5 cycles, and they're like, this happens every fucking day on day, or every cycle on day 25, like, that's helpful, right?
That is super helpful. Yeah. Because then we're able to tell exactly or somewhat tell what happens at that part of the cycle. We know how hormones fluctuate. And so if we know exactly what day that happens, we can tell potentially which hormone is playing a factor in the symptoms.
And I think you could also look at someone's cycle and if they've tracked the entire cycle, because some people just track when they menstruate and that like, I track my cycle. I'm like, oh, there's so much opportunity here. So if someone is tracking their whole cycle, they can also see when they have like highs and when they have lows, not just looking at the lows. And like you mentioned about the hormonal changes, I feel like we definitely live in a world, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. We definitely live in a world that like promotes like happy joy, even if it's fake joy. You know, like, oh my God, my life's so great. Everything looks perfect in my life. And I'm totally not having a breakdown. And I'm just going to keep going on until I fucking die. But there's so much like normalization around that when we actually don't embrace that, hey, it's great to have the darkness, like the darkness of the moon cycle, to dive deep into your shadow and explore that, because it's so normalized to just everything be fine. And then if you're just constantly trying to be on a high, of course you're going to have a big crash. So what do you see like with that balance?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's important to kind of be aware that there will be ups and downs throughout our cycles. Like while we're physically bleeding during our period, of course, we're going to feel a little bit more tired and need a bit more rest because we're physically bleeding and losing iron. And like that's a time of nourishment and rest where we should be taking a bit of an off day if we're able to, or a slower day, and then nourishing our body with like super healthy foods if we're able to do so. So just like utilizing those times in a correct way, because there will be ups and downs. And then during your ups, that's when you should be like, or you should try to be more productive with your time so that you can rest during the times that you should be resting.
Mm-hmm. So long goes like the 9 to 5 work week or work day for the week. Like I really believe, I'm going on a rant here, Lynn, but I really believe that a lot of well, here in Australia anyway, and I know recently in Spain, they're actually looking to normalize menstrual leave, right, at the moment, which is fantastic. However, there's a big backlash for those who are not menstruators, aka mostly men, who are like, but why do they get menstrual leave? And I think a good healthy balance here would be like, look, you've got to work X amount of hours a month. You choose those hours. So that means that when we do have those natural fluctuations of hormones like estrogen that supports more energy or more creativity, okay, maybe you do a 10-hour day that day. And then on the other days, you do like an 8-hour day or vice versa, whatever it might be. What are your thoughts on menstrual leave and balancing out the work?
Yeah, I think that the way you put it is like a really nice idea where as long as it's a certain set of hours per month, that makes sense because it's fair for like both parties, for people with uteruses and people without uteruses. Because at the end of the day, like yes, like our hormones for people who have like ovaries, our hormones are very up and down. And so we do follow a monthly cycle for the most part, versus people who don't have ovaries tend to have very regular baseline hormones every single day. And so they're able to be the same level for the most part of productiveness every single day. And so it's a little bit easier sometimes for them to just be able to kind of like not have as many rest days than menstruators who have more of the fluctuations, and we need to listen to our bodies a little bit more. So it does get tricky to like be able to like be fair for both parties, but that would be a really cool model of like, hey, like X amount of hours per month, like use them as you can, because even around ovulation, some people don't feel so great. And so maybe some people would feel that that's when they need more rest around ovulation, even though a lot of people feel great around ovulation. So there's like definitely, that would be a really cool model for sure.
Well, let's see, maybe 2023, you heard it here first. I've been like ranting about this for a while, but like maybe that's how it could happen for everyone. And I understand there's certain, getting so off topic, but I do understand that there's certain like workplaces, like being a school teacher, you can't just be like, you know what, guys, we're starting school an hour later today. Like I understand that it can't work in all places, but we do have an opportunity to ask for support to see if we can make that happen, or asking, you know, employers if, hey, remember that time when the world shut down and I got to work from home? Like, could I just work from home 2 days a month?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, I'm going on a rant, but there's lots of opportunity there. Lots of opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned you agree. Good. Great. We can just tie in the Northern Hemisphere with the Southern Hemisphere. We can just make this work. So you mentioned earlier or just before about physical and mental signs or symptoms that can lead to PMDD. So what are the physical and then what are the mental? Because I feel like a lot of people would understand the mental signs perhaps of PMDD, but what are also the physical? Like explain both of those to us.
Yeah, so if we go through some of the mental symptoms that some people feel who have either PMS or PMDD, but we're going to focus on PMDD today, the impact would be just very, again, significant, where it impacts relationships, it impacts their ability to work, or it impacts their quality of life at that time. And so when I talk about anxiety or depression coming up during that time of someone's cycle, the definition of PMDD is that it needs to be impactful to someone's quality of life at that point. So not just like a little fluttering thought of like anxiety where it's like, I feel a little bit anxious, but I'm able to push through. It has to be like significant enough that you're fighting with your partner, or you're not able to work, you're not able to get out of bed. And there's obviously different levels of severity, because someone who has a better support system will be able to still push through and get out of bed and go to work than someone who doesn't have those support systems. So the mental health symptoms are anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation comes up quite a lot for people with PMDD as well, whether it's just the thought or it goes further into like almost planning something that time of your cycle. There's also the fatigue, the irritability, the anger, more interpersonal conflict. So again, like fights with your partner or people that you live with or friends. So those are really big ones that come up. Cravings are huge as well. Your impact on like sleep. So you either oversleep or undersleep that time of the cycle. And again, all impacting your life. And having an impact on your quality of life. Versus the physical symptoms, we are talking about bloating, cramps, lower back pain, what else? Like sore, tender breasts. There's so many different things that could come up with physical or somatic symptoms that are part of the diagnostic criteria.
There's really a lot, isn't there?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah. I forget exactly what number, but I want to say there's about, and I could be wrong on this, but there's about 200 or 300 different symptoms that are possible with PMS. That's a lot of symptoms. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No, I definitely know the number is up high around there.
Yeah.
In cyclical school, we talk about PMS, I call it premenstrual signs. But these cycle signs that come up, like that's your body communicating. And most people wouldn't be like, oh, tender boobs, what does that have to do with, PMDD? But I think it's kind of a marrying of like a few different ticks. Not that we like to tick box because the patriarchal world, but just go, okay, we got this and we can identify with that and identify with this. And that's also happening. And I think if you've got stuff happening on both sides of the scale, it's a good time to be like, you know what, I'm just going to learn more about this and seek some support. Is that what you would recommend if someone's listening to this being like, oh my God, I've got all those things?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like reaching out and really asking more questions like, is this a normal amount of symptoms? Is the severity okay? Because like I mentioned earlier, PMS, we can expect some symptoms. Obviously, we're not going to all walk around not have any symptoms around our PMS or around our luteal phase. But as long as they're just more of a little like, I feel a little like twinge in my like breasts because they're a little bit more sore, or like I'm more tired because it's a time where like your energy goes down, but it should never be impactful enough that you're kind of like sitting on the couch all day or unable to get out of bed, and you have like major brain fog. Like if it ever gets to that point, like yes, like definitely bringing it up. Or even like tender breasts to the point of like going up and down the stairs hurts, or you can't even put on a bra because it's so like sore and tender and like swollen. Or anytime that there's more than like a couple symptoms, that's also important to bring that up to a health provider.
Yep. You don't, we've just for too long been like, you know what, that's totally normal. You should totally be in pain. You should totally just sit on the couch all day for 5 days in a row. But listen to your body. It's like we're not designed to be in pain. We're designed to, live a beautiful, fruitful life. And I'm sure there's some people listening who are like, fucking bitch. Like, man, like that's me. I have debilitating pain. And when, I don't get any period pain. I just go about my life totally fine. Don't get stuck in comparing your experience to someone else's experience. There's some really beautiful lessons in your experience. So reach out for support from someone like a naturopathic doctor to learn about all the functioning processes, to work with a menstrual cycle coach to understand how you can live more cyclically in harmony with your cycle. Work with a team of people. That's what I always say. Do you have anything to add to that before I ask the next question?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I feel like a group approach works really well for a lot of people. And like, even having like a really good, like functional medical doctor on your team would be great too, because they have a different approach sometimes too, like, or a holistic based medical doctor as well. And I find that our lifestyle and our society nowadays doesn't, it kind of feeds into this whole like PMS and PMDD, because we don't have the time to rest, and we just keep like throwing everything under the rug, like, oh, it's fine, it's just that time of the month. And it's like, we shouldn't have to deal with that. Like, it's super important to like talk about it and really see like, is there anything you could do to support that and live in harmony, like you said, with your cycles, because most of us cycle for a really long time, for many years. And so it's important to kind of like learn how to go with the flow. Sorry for my no pun intended there, but
No,
yeah,
I
how to
love
go
it.
with your flow. Because it's, yeah, it's important. It's part of your life, and we should kind of learn how to like harness the powers of it.
Mm. Hear ye, sister, hear ye. Could not completely agree anymore. So tell us, with the cycle, what are the hormones that contribute to PMDD and things like PMS? Now, I know PMS is such a broad, like you said, over 200, it's such a broad like term. But if we focus even just on the PMDD, what hormones contribute to that? Is there specific hormonal imbalances that are good signs? Or maybe you do fall in this category somewhat. Let's look what else is contributing. Tell us.
Yeah, so it's actually a really good question, and one that, if you look at the evidence, it was quite interesting what the research shows when it comes to PMDD. So progesterone is at play here for PMDD, because what they found is ovulation needs to happen for PMDD to be an issue. And so obviously after you ovulate, that's when you release progesterone, and then PMDD can happen. And so it's not that there's a problem with progesterone per se, because when they tested blood work on people who had PMS or PMDD and people who did not have it, and kind of like mixed them up and said, like, guess who has it and who doesn't? You can't tell based on the blood work who has it and who doesn't, because we all go through right after ovulation a quick like up of progesterone and the quick downfall of it. And that's what leads to your period. It's actually, when it comes to PMDD, it's your sensitivity to the up and the down that causes the symptoms. And so how that happens is that we have GABA receptors in our brain, and the GABA receptors are in charge of relaxation, calming. They're a really calming neurotransmitter. And they found that with people who have PMDD, progesterone is supposed to be acting on those receptors and calming down our brain and giving us a sense of like calm and like feeling really chill. But with people with PMDD, they almost get a sensitivity to the hormone at that time of their cycle where it does the opposite. They actually feel the opposite of what they should. And so it doesn't calm them down. It like upregulates and like causes this whole I don't know, like imbalance, I guess, in like your brain and how your brain talks to your body. And so you end up with all these symptoms. And so it's really, I would compare it almost like to a food sensitivity, where some people cannot eat gluten because they're sensitive to it. This is almost a sensitivity to the progesterone at that time of the cycle. And it's really interesting because for the longest time, we thought it was truly an imbalance that was happening. But the balance is there. It's the person's reaction to the hormone that is causing a problem, which is why some of the strategies around it, the more conventional strategies, are to stop ovulation, because then that fixes the problem. I mean, fixes the problem. I say
In
that
inverted
as,
brackets.
yeah, in like, I guess a more band-aid solution, it fixes the problem because it stops ovulation, therefore there's no more progesterone. But as soon as like ovulation restarts, then PMDD comes right back. But it is used as one of the strategies, because if there's no progesterone, that reaction is not happening, so therefore the symptoms aren't coming up.
Wow. I'm just like, wow, listening to you. Firstly, that's not a solution. There's so many
No.
other solutions. And like you said, it's like a band-aid. Yes, it might remove the challenge right now, but what about in 5 years' time when you decide that you'd like to maybe start a family? Or what about when you decide, hang on, I don't want to be on this hormonal form of contraception anymore. I'd like to, reduce the toxic load on my liver or whatnot. So interesting though, what you mentioned about the sensitivity with progesterone. Love the analogy with gluten. Love analogies. Because it really shows that, hey, some people are more sensitive than others. And I think that when we look at the cycle, I know there's probably a lot of listeners, Lynne, listening to this, be like, yeah, but I don't have PMDD and I still feel like I'm going down at that time of my cycle. So maybe you don't have a sensitivity, but we are naturally turning inward. Yeah. And so not everyone feels calm and restful. But I think the more we live cyclically and we embrace eating for each phase of our cycle, moving for each phase of our cycle, honoring the emotions, the creativity in each phase of our cycle, we start to allow that body to drop in that luteal phase of rest, of calm. And we start to do things long and slow and strong instead of fast paced and action taking and doing. So great explanation, because I feel like a lot of people get really confused with those hormone balances and they just go, oh, I've just got a hormone imbalance. Do you see that a lot in your practice? Like, oh, I've got so many hormonal imbalances.
Yeah, I definitely see that often. And I also see where people are testing, or I'm testing their hormones for my patients, and it comes back normal. And it could feel really defeating because they were so stuck in like, I have a hormonal imbalance. And then we have to go down the route of your body's reaction to the hormone may not be appropriate. So it might be that your hormones are doing what they are supposed to do, but your reaction is not appropriate to that hormone. And so it's causing these issues. And then our treatment plan is more based off of how do we, again, support your body as you're going through these different these different parts of your cycle? And how do we make sure that you're not sensitive to the shifts happening? Because that could be quite a lot. I mean, it looks like a roller coaster when you look at it on a diagram. There's ups and downs and ups and downs.
And there's four different things. And like, how do I know which one's which? And it's, yeah.
I think I like to phrase it like there's not a single day for menstruators where our hormones are the exact same. We are constantly in a shift. There's not a single day that it's the exact same as the day before. And so of course we're going to feel different every single day. But as long as we learn how to support that as best as we can, then it's easier to, again, live with those shifts and not be systematic.
I love that explanation, because I'm on day 18 of my cycle today as we're recording this. And this day, the way my hormones are right now, is only going to happen another 12 times in the next 365 days. So, yeah. We're very different to those born without physical uteruses and non-menstruators in that sense, because their hormones are pretty much the same every single day and they run on that 24-hour cycle. And that's really why it's so important for us to have a different approach to living in that cyclical nature. And you mentioned treatment plans. I could imagine, and I've not been down this path myself because I personally have not had PMDD, but I could imagine that in a Western allopathic practicing doctor clinic, that I might get diagnosed with PMDD and then told, all right, well, you need to use an antidepressant and go on the contraceptive pill, for example. And that's probably from what I understand, what most of their suggestions would be. But what is a holistic treatment plan look like, natural versions, and what can we do? And before you answer that question, what is it likely that they're going to be recommended from a general practicing doctor?
Yeah, so you pretty much answered it already. So the first line therapy for PMDD is an SSRI, so an antidepressant. So that seems to be first line. And it's interesting because some studies use it all month long, all the time, like a general antidepressant. And other studies have found that even if the patient just takes it for 2 weeks out of the month, they also get benefit. And so if that is something that is needed for very severe PMDD with like suicidal ideation, then it might be an option to only consider it 2 weeks out of the month, right? For very severe cases, or even the whole month. But there are a lot of holistic options, like you mentioned, and I'd love to go over them. I don't know if you wanted to talk about like supplementation and vitamins first, or if you wanted to go down the nutrition route first. Do you have a preference?
There's so much. No, share it in a way that you think is beneficial. I love to think of things really simplistically in the sense that if it's too overwhelming, most people just aren't going to take action on it. So if you want to maybe like put all of the nutrition together and then maybe put lifestyle factors, if you've got any lifestyle factors together. But yeah, nutrition, supplements, tell us, is there actually, quickly on that thought, is there any deficiencies that can lead or contribute to things such as PMDD?
So a short answer, yes. There could be deficiencies that link to that just based on like all these different pathways that need to really line up and function really well for our cycles to function well and for even our neurotransmitters in our brain to function well. So indirectly, yes, there could be deficiencies causing a worsening of PMDD, especially I mean, we're going to talk about calcium as an option and B6 as an option. So those are my main ones. And vitamin D2, vitamin D3 as well. I didn't mean to say D2.
You meant vitamin D as well.
As well, exactly. Vitamin D3 is a really important supplement as well, and it plays a large role in PMS and PMDD. So we'll chat about that. But the way that I like to start is nutrition, because I find nutrition needs to be there. It's really a foundational thing that even if we take supplements, if our nutrition isn't there, they almost act like a Band-Aid solution too, right? Like
Totally.
they just supplement what we're not able to get through food. And so I do like to start with food. And again, I want to bring it back to like evidence and research, because I love science and understanding like, is there research behind nutrition for PMDD? And what was really interesting about the research is they found that both extremes when it comes to nutrition, either under eating or overeating, caused a worsening of PMS and PMDD. And so it's really important to, again, have that like really well balanced diet as much as we can and not go to the extremes. Because I know oftentimes like we as a society are going more towards like restrictive diet sometimes, like intermittent fasting, which in some ways can be helpful. But when we're talking about PMS and PMDD, not so much. Like it's really important to nourish our body all day long and make sure that we're having enough calories, but not too much of the not good type of calories. Research also shows that decreasing or eliminating alcohol is super important. The research didn't really go down the rabbit hole of like, is it because of like liver detox and how it like slows that down? That I don't know and can't answer based off research, but they did find that people who drank more alcohol or consumed more alcohol were more likely to deal with PMS and PMDD. The carbohydrate, so the carb portion was also really interesting, because if someone consumed more of the like simple sugars, they tended to have more PMS and PMDD. But if you consume more of the complex carbs and a higher carb diet that time during the luteal phase, you did better when and PMDD symptoms. So at the end of the day, I always recommend to really eat a nourishing diet that contains the complex carbs. There is a reason why we crave carbs in the luteal phase.
Totally.
Because it's actually helpful for us that time of the cycle. Like it's super important to like eat those complex carbs that have lots of fiber in them and not to go really low carb that time of the cycle. And a reduction in sodium is also really important. They found a clear link between higher sodium diets and higher PMS and PMDD symptoms.
Wow. I love that you mentioned that about carbs in the inner autumn time, because so many of us think that, oh, I get the munchies and I'm so hungry and I'm premenstrual. So like, I'm just going to eat all the fucking chips. I'm going to have the ice cream. I'm just going to eat all the sweets, but they're actually not contributing to the healthy requirements of that time of your cycle, and also good preparation for when you menstruate. So some examples, do you mind if I share some examples of healthy kind of carbs that I love? And I'd love to hear yours. I really look forward to at this time of my cycle. It's like the one, time of the cycle that I'll eat loaded potatoes. So I'll make loaded sweet potatoes. Yum. I love to make gnocchi. So gnocchi or like a pesto, buckwheat pasta. I also really love to have nachos, and my nachos are actually just grated veggies, with corn chips. And like, that's kind of like a naughty food. For me, it feels like a naughty food anyway. But it's so beneficial at that time of the cycle, as opposed to like eating it pre-ovulatory. So what are some healthy meal options that you would suggest for that premenstrual luteal phase time?
For sure. So like a really healthy, I guess, like carb option. Like what I love for breakfast is a really good like overnight oatmeal, because that's
Mm.
quite nourishing, and you can easily add like a nut butter and like hemp hearts on there and make it super healthy. I also really love sweet potatoes because I feel like that's a really good complex carb and quite nourishing. Like it's a really gentle one too, and easy to digest for a lot of people. And any kind of like quinoa rice dish, as long as it's like a complex whole grain, is kind of nice too, especially if you do more of a stir fry with it, with the veggies on top.
Mm.
And yeah, like
Or a
those really
curry, or
nourishing. Yeah.
lots of root veggies. I'm getting so salivating here. Um, no, this is perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Now tell us about the micronutrients. So like the supplements, I like to call them nutritional products, but what kind of nutritional products or micronutrients are actually beneficial to have extra or more of outside of our food to complement the food that we're eating?
Yeah, so when it comes to natural health products or vitamins, what the research shows is calcium performed really, really well for PMDD and PMS as well, to the point of it hit almost every single symptom. It definitely helped with the mood changes such as irritability, anger, the cravings, the insomnia, the fatigue, but it also helped with some of the somatic symptoms like the physical bloating and the tender breasts. And the reason why I was trying to figure out like why calcium, like that's such a odd one. A lot of people are shocked that calcium really does help with PMDD and PMS. It's because estrogen levels rise at that time of the cycle in the luteal phase, and it lowers your calcium levels. And calcium is really important for the serotonin receptors in the brain. And if you don't have enough, then your serotonin pathway is impacted. And for
Mm.
someone who is already sensitive to the shift in the hormones, the progesterone specifically, they will feel that impact a lot more. And so calcium performed really, really well. Typically, most people see an improvement within 2 to 4 months of taking a calcium supplement. So it's really cool that like it helps with that. Otherwise, B6, we know that there is research using B6 for PMS and PMDD as well. It works through different pathways. Not only does it help support hormones, but also helps with the neurotransmitters in the brain. So it has been shown to help improve a lot of the, again, both physical and mood changes occurring with PMDD. And vitamin D is a big one. And I know a lot of us are deficient probably in the whole world, we're all deficient in vitamin D, right? I know in North America, the stats are actually quite high in how many people are deficient, that most people tend to supplement with it on a yearly basis. But they have found a clear link between someone who's deficient has a higher risk of having PMS or PMDD. And so by replenishing it, it really is beneficial. Because vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, I do recommend that most people get it tested first, if possible, especially if they're doing mega dosage. Just to make sure they're not overloading their body too much with it, because you can overload on it. But if you're doing more base dosages or moderate dosages, not everyone gets tested. It's just kind of ideal so that you know exactly if you need to take like 1 or 2 drops a day, or if you need to take like 20 to 30 drops a day. Because here in Canada, it's only sold as like 1,000 IUs per drop. And so I don't know if it's different where you are, but yeah, the dosage is quite low. What's available over the counter here in North America.
Vitamin D here on average is about 1,000 IUs, but in tablet form, there's not that much option here
Mm.
for liquid form. But most of it is like the very small tablets. And you just say about megadose, so you just reminds me of when I had the Rona and I was taking like 60,000 units a day. And my partner's looking at me like I can't even think about how much vitamin C I gave myself, obviously through like duration and, quality, quantity, and like separation, but of taking it, because it's like water soluble. So I wasn't taking it all at once. I was like every, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, I was taking vitamin C, and he was waking me up in the middle of the night to be like, you got to take your vitamin C now. But vitamin D is so important. I actually recommend to my clients that there's a product with magnesium, vitamin D, and calcium all chelated together. Of course, as you would know, vitamin D is great with a fat soluble vitamin to help you absorb those nutrients. And I always say, look, just take extra that week leading into your menstruation. And I find that the reports that I've received from clients is it's very supportive in helping prepare for your cycle or your menstruation. It's also a good time to be like, okay, so I've got to up this here, and I've got to start maybe having my castor oil pack, and then, okay, I'm going to change my food. And so it's a really good time to like create change for your cycle for a healthy bleed. But I love what you mentioned about vitamin D, because it's so vitally important. Like every cell in our body needs vitamin D, and so many people are deficient, even if they think, oh, but I spend a lot of time in the sun. I'm like, you can't just absorb through your skin. You have to be a little bit sweaty. You absorb more vitamin D through like the whiter parts of your skin than the yang parts of your skin. So yeah, big rant on that, but I love that you suggested those. So would you recommend taking those all separately in a supplement form or putting them together? Of course, go and get some blood test done. I like to do that every 6 months myself, just to find out where my levels are at. Even though I'm healthy, you can still go and get tested even if you're healthy. What would you recommend? Like putting it all together? Because most people are like, okay, calcium, got to buy that separately. B6, got to get that separately. Vitamin D, got to get that separately. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my thoughts are it really does depend on the brand that people are using, because some brands are the correct dose all within one capsule. And that's great when you can achieve that. If you can take 1 or 2 capsules of a complex product, is what I like to call it, where all the ingredients are in there, great. But if you're not achieving a therapeutic dose, then it may not do anything for you. So that's when we like to separate them and do like a separate calcium, a separate magnesium. But a cal mag together tends to be the correct dose in one product. With a vitamin D, they're able to usually fit all of that in there at the correct dose. And timing of the day, kind of the same thing. If someone's able to remember to take something consistently every single day at the same time, great. Don't worry about separating it and having this like huge protocol of like 3 times per day. If you remember once a day and you're consistent with that, it's better for someone to stick to that than try to have this complex schedule where they're going to forget half of their dose most days.
Or they're just going to forget to take them at all anyway.
Yeah.
And I think, we can come full circle and say that, supplementation is very good and very supportive with the right quality of product, the right brand of product, the right dose, and duration. But it's your food that's more important. So, you can't, I always say, you can't just eat a fucking burger every day and just then take a multivitamin and think that you're just going to be healthy. The good food works well with good supplements, and they actually work together like a team. So, find a happy balance between the two. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why I said like nutrition is foundation, because without it, we could take all the supplements in the world and not feel any better, because we're not changing the lifestyle piece, which is good nutrition, good movement, decreasing stress, sleeping really well. Like those are all really, really foundation to our health. And yeah, the supplements won't fix those things. And so
Totally.
if you stop taking a supplement, it's going to come right back, right? If those foundational things aren't being addressed as well.
I love that. Great little analogy there on how that all works. Now, I've got 2 final questions because we're almost out of time, probably over time actually. But if everyone listening who might think, oh, maybe I fall down that path sometimes of leaning into like towards PMDD, or I've got a friend who has PMDD, what would you recommend, Lynne, is like the top 3 to 5 things that someone can do to support themselves right now?
Yeah, so right now, the top thing would be start tracking, because I feel like that is so powerful information that they can use towards talking to a healthcare practitioner, or seeing if like what they're dealing with is significant or impactful to their life. I would also suggest like really reflecting on the person's lifestyle. Like, are they really, really busy, on the go all the time, stressed out? And if so, can anything change? I know we can't get rid of stress, but we can make small changes to make it more manageable. And so stress impacts our hormones so much through the HPA axis, which is a whole other conversation that we're not going to get into today.
Need a whole episode just for that one.
I agree. And so, yeah, stress is number 2. Sleep is my number 3. Like if you're not sleeping, your hormones will not work properly, because the circadian rhythm is so important to support having the really nice spike of melatonin at night and the rise in cortisol in the morning. For a really good cortisol awakening response is like beautiful and what we want to see, so that your other hormones can be supported. Really focusing on blood sugar balance would be my other, I guess, like recommendation, because if we're constantly consuming simple sugars, we get these spikes and drops in blood sugar, and that would impact our cortisol, which would then impact our reproductive hormones and our periods and like PMS and all of that. So really focusing on fiber and protein and healthy fats at all your meals, including snacks. I know a lot of people sometimes forget snacks like require still those basics there, right? Sometimes we're quick at grabbing a granola bar or crackers that contain nothing but like sugar and add things in there, and it's like, okay, let's have hummus with the crackers, or like something that adds like protein, like a handful of almonds with your crackers. So really focusing on supporting blood sugar. And my fifth one is movement. I know
Mm.
movement can tie into like the stress relief for some people, but really important to like move our body every day, because I feel like that is important to health. And it doesn't have to be a full workout or like cardio or anything. Like something as simple as a walk, even a walk in nature, right, could really help de-stress and like reground you.
I love those 5. Even just like stretching or doing like a yin yoga class, which is basically just stretching, like awesome for your body. I love these tips. Thank you. Now, everyone's probably listening to me like, how do I learn more about Lynne? She's got such good tips and advice. How can people find you? Like, what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, the best way to connect is through my Instagram. I do personally respond to the DMs and all the DMs. Sometimes they get lost in the other folder, but I eventually see them. So my Instagram is at Dr. Lynne ND. So that's DRLYNNE. for Naturopathic Doctor. And yeah, they can connect with me there. I share a lot of information. Like most of my posts are actually infographics. Just so it's like really educational, and people have a resource to go back to and save.
People love resources. So I love that. I'll put all of those links in the show notes. So thank you so much for sharing, including a link to your website and all the things. Now, I have a final podcast question for you. So I'm looking forward to your answer to this. We're switching gears. I want you to think back to your younger self, Lynne, when you got your first period. What are 3 things that you wish you had have known then that you now know today?
Yeah. The first thing is I wish that our education system was better around periods. I don't know how it is where you are, but here I find that periods aren't really talked about as much in school. And so I remember being a little bit confused and being like, what is happening? Why am I bleeding? And not really understanding until my mom was like, this is your period. This is fine. Like, you're not going to die. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. I feel like education for young girls could be, or young menstruators could be a lot better in school. And then I wish I knew it didn't have to be painful. I lived for far too many years in pain during my teenage years, and I remember it really impacting my life, like really not being able to attend certain social events because I was in so much pain. I had to be at home with my heat pack and like my tea and like just like, yeah, I know it's like I'm supposed to rest during that time, but I remember just being sad that I wasn't able to like attend certain things because my period was so bad. Um, and then the other thing is I wish that I knew that there would have been more options than just birth control. So I never personally took an oral contraceptive, but I remember that that was the only option that I was given. And then I felt kind of defeated, like, well, if I don't want to be on that, then I have no other option. And so again,
Mm.
like tying it back to that's why I lived in pain for so long, because I wasn't given any other alternatives. It was that or nothing. And so, yeah, I just wish there would be a lot more education around everything.
Beautiful wishes. I wish all of those things too. Lynne, thank you so much for being here, dedicating your time to share all of your beautiful wisdom, particularly about PMDD, a conversation that we definitely need a lot more of. Thank you for being here. And it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for tuning into every episode of the Well Woman podcast. For everything we mentioned in today's episode, you can find this in the show notes over at wellsome.com/podcast. If this episode excited you, please hit follow on Spotify, which means all of my episodes will pop up in your feed weekly so you never miss a weekly drop. I'd love you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts too. Love this episode? Come and follow me over on Instagram at wellsome_Jema. Say hi and share what you've taken away from this episode with me. Now, is there a bestie, sister, or a friend who you know who might be fed up, frustrated, and confused with their cycles? Are they ready to join you in awakening their cyclical essence too? Well, take a screenshot of this podcast episode, share it on your socials, email it, text it, or any way you need to get it to them. So together we can all live in flow, harmony, and balance with our cycles. Now, until next time, beautiful, get connected, listen to your body, and remember, body confidence all begins with living in tune with your menstrual cycle.